It's a named tweet. It's called Counterculture Clash. When you censor something, countercultural attention is drawn to it. Positive, negative, everything in between. There is a counterculture for every culture, and for every counterculture, a counterculture, and there is always more. There always will be another counterculture for every counterculture. Plan your trip accordingly. So, Counterculture Clash. When you censor something, countercultural attention is drawn to it. So, of course, everyone knows by now. Everyone knows by now that when you censor something, when you remove it from the public square, the modern public square that I call the internet, with all these post-governmental entities and agencies like Twitter and Facebook, and Google, Amazon, these are bigger than many governments. They're more influential in all these different things than many of these smaller countries and governments. But we do this thing on the public square where it's the Barbara Streisand effect. The Streisand effect. When you go ahead and remove something or say something is taboo, it's human nature for us to go after it and say, well, we want to experience it. We now it has value. It has a value it didn't have before. Save that tweet. Save that tweet. Save everything. Really, archive everything. That's the way to go. Actually, Stick, Sex, and Hammer has this thing called I think it's called the Archive Everything movement. Every time you see something online that you believe should be preserved and you think may be censored, maybe, there'll be a censorship and it'll get countercultural attention. Definitely archive as much as you can. Save videos, and that way people from the future will understand what's going on. Because I feel like, one reason we do these tweet videos, time delayed. Like I cut the segments up months after the video's recorded, and I also go back to the past. And this will be our last video for 2019. It's July 2020. We go back to the past to find a greater context for everything that's going on. It gives you an idea that where my mind was when I was writing this, and then of course the further delay of where my mind is when reading it. And then, like going back to these tweets here is interesting, but going back to videos from early April, March, where COVID was just coming into effect in terms of America, in terms of becoming part of our lives for realsies. It's interesting to see my demeanor back then and how I was approaching it. My approach hasn't changed that much, but in general, it's a window to a time that we maybe didn't necessarily experience. I say that like there's things that happen in politics, especially like the day by day. You can't even remember what happened 2 weeks ago sometimes. You can't remember what happened. So imagine someone coming in like 2022, and then you say, well, there was a Twitter hack in July 2020, and Barack Obama and Joe Biden and Bill Gates and Elon Musk and Kanye West and all these people had their accounts hacked. And then there was a DDoS on Cloudflare the next day. Nobody's going to know that unless they were here to experience it. That's not going to be reported. Like, that's not going to be renewed and reviewed years from now unless we save it and talk about it. These moments pass and then they're gone. They become hearsay. It's all about timing. It's about timing. When you're talking about false flags, it's about timing. You look at like situations like, oh, the timing was perfect. You had to be there. You had to be there. Sometimes you really have to be there. And so like I feel like we miss it, and that's why the videos get time delayed, so that there is this moment caught. This moment, everything's timed out, and I've found some very interesting things happen. But back to the tweet. When you censor something, countercultural attention is drawn to it. Positive, negative, and everything in between. when things are censored or removed, or there's a big hullabaloo about it, a big to-do about this one thing, more people are going to look at it. Okay, if you had just let it go and let it do its thing, sure, it would have gotten a lot of publicity as well. But getting rid of it, you get this effect. The counterculture to that culture will, of course, find something of value, of worth with it, positive, negative, or anything in between. There is a counterculture for every culture, and for every counterculture, a counterculture, and there always will be. Plan your trip accordingly. So that's right. And this goes into a little bit of a broader area here when we talk about the counterculture for every culture. So we have this thing called mainstream culture. It's the one that most people subscribe to in any given country or area of the world. It's the general consensus, the mainstream. And then you have a counterculture to that. There's always something bubbling up, sort of the dissenters, like the Gab app, Dissenter. It lets you comment on any URL online. Check it out, gab.com. But you have dissent. There's got to be light so there can be dark. There's got to be dark so there can be light. For every point, a counterpoint. For every culture, a counterculture. We have this back and forth, and of course the energy dissipates over time. Leave a comment below with your examples of countercultural. But there is this thing. So you start off, well, usually it's the mainstream culture at the moment. It might be liberal, it might be conservative, whatever the decade or era is that you're dealing with. You have a culture. In the 60s, it was this sort of, the 50s had the nuclear family and the baby boom, and you had all this stuff going on that was America, Americana, manufacturing was up, all these things were happening. Post World War II, all this stuff happened, and then we were going into the Korean War, we had Vietnam, we had all this stuff, and then you have the counterculture. Counterculture was growing in the 60s. You had the Summer of Love, you had the beatnik movement, you had all this different stuff that sort of, critiqued and was a juxtaposition, was a counterpoint to the mainstream culture, the current culture of the time. And of course, there's always a backlash against everything. For every culture, there's a counterculture. There's always a backlash culture. So people start to actually, they start to build a community around their dislike of something or their opposition to something. People have been saying a lot. So I believe, this is a little bit of a tangent, but I believe that the 2020 U.S. presidential election is a referendum on identity politics. But there's a couple of different things going on here. We are seeing the Black Lives Matter movement, the identitarianism. We are seeing from multiple angles there, but you're seeing it now. You're seeing that we had an American culture, and then critical race theory in the modern religion of social justice came in, and third wave and fourth wave feminism, and how people are oppressed or they're institutional, systemic. I don't have to add the words. Not that I'm afraid of YouTube censoring, because we have a video out, how to solve racism in 2 minutes. Check it out on YouTube. But we have these different sides. And then, of course, because the Democrats push IDPol, social Marxism, intersectionality, the modern religion of social justice, they push it so hard that the Republicans have to do it too. Now, Trump has been trying to use identity politics in a nationalistic sense. He's been trying to go, hey, you're American. I don't care what color, race, creed, gender. I don't care what your pronouns are. You're an American. You're an American. He's done that, but then you kind of have to go, well, they're calling me a racist every day, so here's an African American statistic. Numbers are all that matter, right? Unemployment numbers were down, of course, because of COVID. They're back up, but like he's had to do this sort of like, well, we care about Hispanics, we care about everybody. They never said they care about whites because it's a white majority country, and nobody can say anything good about whites because it's social justice. They're the oppressor. They're the majority. You're being oppressed. You are a victim. Remember, check out my video, Infantilization Engine, for more on how you're a victim. You are a victim. It's very helpful, very productive to think in that frame. So definitely check that video out. But this election is a referendum, and I think that a lot of what you're seeing now, and I am part of this movement, we have this programming of social justice and in identity politics. But then you have the counterculture to that, which is people like me. They keep on saying things like, we are to be judged by the content of our character, not our immutable characteristics. Like Gad Sad says, the sad truth on YouTube. Shout out to Gad Sad. But we have this counterculture that we have formed, in which we just counter-program against the programming, the code. We are the counter code. We are saying, no. We want to be seen as Americans. We want to be seen as the French, the Chinese. We want to be seen as the country. We want to move to this format of every country for itself. We'll work together, but it's a nationalistic America first, Canada first, Mexico first. You know? That's the system we're going for. Egypt first. Russia first. Russia. Ooh. Russia. Ukraine first. Wait a second. What was Ukraine? I don't even remember. If you remember why I made a Ukraine reference, leave a comment below. Yeah, I don't even remember. Anyway, there is a counterculture for every culture. And for every counterculture, a counterculture. And there always will be. Get ready. Because every time there's a movement, there's a counter movement. It might be smaller. Sometimes it's bigger. But, hey, you never know. You never know what you're going to find out there, depending on how persuasive or influential somebody or something is. And yeah, I like to just kind of watch. I take part too, of course, in the counter-programming against the identitarianism. We preach anti-identitarianism on this channel, but again, I'm sure you could find a contradiction somewhere in there, depending on the context you're observing. But yeah, I say plan your trip accordingly. Get ready.